Help, my freezer's full of venison and I don't know what to make. Hi, welcome to my channel, A Country Life. I'm Jennifer, and today I'm going to share with you a recipe for meatloaf. What do I have here? I have 3 1/4 pounds of ground venison. I know this says ground beef, but the packages, when I went to order them, the packages that said beef were a lot cheaper than the packages that said wild game, so I ended up buying the wild beef ones because I'm all about the saving pennies. This is a really simple recipe, very inexpensive to make. It uses eggs, ketchup, plain breadcrumbs, and then my original recipe. Oh, what do you have?
Dinosaur bones.
Oh, you're still working on your dinosaur bones, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And over here, I put all my ingredients into a bowl. I just dump it all in at once, and then I'm going to stir. I'm going to stir this all up. But let me just give you the rundown how I know how much of each one of these things to use. Here's how I make my meatloaf. For each pound of meat, I use 1 egg, a 1/3 cup of ketchup, a scant 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs, a heaping teaspoon of this beef soup base, a good sized tablespoon, this again is per pound, of dried minced onion, and then also 2 tablespoons of water, which I remember I have to put the water in here too. The original recipe actually does call for an Lipton onion soup mix pouch, but I just rarely have those on hand. To make a pouch of Lipton onion soup mix, it's just a mixture of minced onion, and then I use this creamy, better than bouillon roasted beef base. I picked this up at Walmart right by all the bouillon cubes and things like that. Just give me a minute. I'm going to get the water in here and I'm going to stir this all up, and then I'll put it in the pan. What I like about this recipe for meatloaf is that I can just adjust it to however much I want to make. When I was first making this, when I just had a couple kids, I usually would just start with 1.5 pounds of meat, but now as our family has grown, I can just adjust it accordingly, and I almost always use 3 pounds. Sometimes I use 4 pounds, but that was the very last of our venison from last year. I'd have to check for sure, but I think we put in the freezer around 9 deer last year, bow hunting in September, and then gun season in November. This was the last of it, and bow season opens this Saturday, so I'm hoping that somebody can connect here soon to fill that freezer up with meat again. Speaking of venison, I really do think that venison makes a much better meatloaf. You know, meatloaf is one of those dishes that just seems like it gets a bad rap all the time. People go, ooh, meatloaf. But I think it's because when you make meatloaf with, hey, we got a package.
I thought it was my helmet, but...
I don't think it's a helmet.
Well, I thought it was, but then it's not.
Okay, so I think, you know, when you use beef to make meatloaf, it kind of gets real greasy, especially if you put it in a loaf pan, and you know, a lot of that grease just kind of swims up to the top, and it doesn't look real attractive. You can get away from that by putting shaping your meatloaf and putting it onto a pan with one of these wire racks. Put the meatloaf on that, but definitely be sure you spray it first. Otherwise it'll stick pretty bad to that. Venison is not very fatty, and it's a drier meat. Maybe they think venison tastes a little strong. I think that adding all these different spices and whatnot to it, if you don't really care for maybe the flavor of straight venison, grinding up the venison and then using it as hamburger with other ingredients and things, it just kind of makes it more likable to people who don't necessarily like venison. Amber and I were talking about meatloaf just the other day because she had gone to a 4-H event where they served meatloaf, and she was actually looking forward to it. And when she got the meatloaf, and I don't even know if she ended up taking it, but when she looked at the meatloaf, she was like, that does not look like anything that I've seen before. She said either my mom's making it wrong or they're making it wrong. So I think there's a lot of personal preference with meatloaf too. My mom made meatloaf a lot. I think I liked it as a kid. I really don't remember, but I do know that I love it now, and I think just about every member of the family likes it. There's a chance Maria doesn't, but otherwise everybody seems to like it. This is kind of tricky trying to stir this one-handed, so I'm going to turn the camera off. Now, I split this up between 2 greased loaf pans. These are just like a 9x5x3, I think it's called, and I really don't think it matters what kind of pan you put it in. My mom just put it in a loaf pan, and it's called Meatloaf, so I guess I've just always put it in a loaf pan, but I have actually seen recipes where they've formed it and put it onto a cookie sheet, and then I'm just going to top it with a whole bunch of ketchup because everybody likes that, in the oven for at least an hour at 350. Bake, start. Usually I make baked potatoes when I'm making meatloaf because since I already have the oven turned on, I can just line the potatoes all the way around the outside of the pans of meatloaf. But today I didn't have any potatoes on hand. They're all still down in the garden underground, and I didn't want to take the time. I did dig potatoes a few weeks ago, and then I turned them all into mashed potatoes and froze them, so that's what I ended up doing for tonight. I just pulled one out of the freezer, and I've got that warming. For tonight's supper, I'll have meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and then I have one last harvest of broccoli, just a little bit, but we'll do that, and then I have some green beans. So that's what supper is going to be. I thank you so very much for watching. If you like these types of videos, the ones that are recipes to use with ground venison, give it a thumbs up and stay tuned because there's 4 more coming in the future. Thanks, bye-bye.